Well, you might remember a couple of weeks ago, I went to Geneva, Switzerland. Very interesting city, over a century of diplomacy in that place. But diplomacy, which I think once meant going to fight for your country's interests abroad, now has taken over a new meaning. Diplomats themselves have their own agendas. Places like the United Nations have their own point of view that they impose on their member countries. It's not like a member of the French palace sending a memo to the Ottoman Turk advocating for itself. It's not a place of national interest. There is now a globalist interest, and that's what I was studying at the Geneva get-together of the World Health Organization, where they were working on the Global Pandemic Treaty. They want to proceduralize, normalize, codify the kind of lockdowns that happened hodgepodge last time. They want to make them into an international treaty that could theoretically become binding law upon its member states. That is a perpetual machine. These annual gatherings of the UN, they've been doing it, for example, for decades with their global warming treaties. But I tell you, it seems that I didn't have to fly so far to find a kind of pandemic treaty. If I'm understanding the latest story from True North by their journalist Cosmin, Dzsurdzsa, let me read for you the headline. It's Vaccine Mandates, Border Measures, Part of Updated North American Flu Pandemic Plan. Really? Joining me now to talk about this is the author, Cosmin Dzsurdzsa. It's my pleasure to have you. I don't understand, what is the North American flu pandemic plan? Is it a plan? Is it a treaty? Is it binding? Tell me more about it, because this, frankly, is the first I've heard of it, and I need you to educate me.
Right. So it's a trilateral agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and it's actually been in existence since 2007. But it's been updated this year, actually this month in June, because in 2021, these countries got together and decided that they need to put into place what they learned from the COVID-19 pandemic into work. And this agreement is quite sweeping. It actually moves away from the original plan, which was actually only about avian flu, so bird flu. But this extends to all sorts of public health emergencies, and even further, like radiological nuclear events. It's a sweeping agreement that dictates how these countries will respond to these incidents, and it involves some of the highest ministries in all of these countries, including Canada's Public Health Agency, Global Affairs Canada, and Public Safety Canada.
The first sentence in your story is certainly eye-catching. Vaccine mandates, border measures, and travel restrictions are on the table as part of an updated human-animal influenza pandemic agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. That is a list of disasters. Those were the worst things about the COVID-19 lockdowns. Vaccine mandates, abusive, widely now debunked medically, and the civil liberties aspect of it, a disaster. Border measures, I presume that would include things like the spyware app ArriveCan. And then travel restrictions. Well, we all know that the unjabbed were banned from flying even within their own country. You just listed some of the worst parts of COVID-19, and you're saying, to use your phrase, those are on the table now in this three-party deal. What does that mean, on the table? Is it part of a treaty, or is some country proposing it? How would these things be codified?
Right. So it's an emergency response coordination group, and they essentially, it's very shadowy, it's not transparent, but they have a governance structure that is picked by these agencies from all of these governments, and they staff it. And when there's an emergency, it triggers a sort of process, and that can include discussing things like border measures, travel restrictions, vaccine mandates, but they can also force private groups, companies, parts of critical infrastructure and supply chains to also implement measures based on their diktats. So it's quite crazy. And you were right to point out at the beginning that we're entering into this international pandemic treaty with the WHO. And I see this particular agreement, to the North American continental one, as an expansion of that. We're really trending towards these centralized international bodies dictating what sovereign nations can and can't do when responding to emergencies, whether real or not.
You know, I did not know there were so many public health officers in Canada until the pandemic. Why would I know that? Why would that be of interest to me? There was Theresa Tam, and some of the provincial and bigger cities had them. I mean, Eileen de Villa in Toronto is the name of one, for example, Bonnie Henry in BC. But every health region, every small town, like there are hundreds of these people in Canada, and they're typically making more than a rock star doctor would. That's the crazy thing. I hate when people say, Theresa Tam, Canada's top doctor. What did she, top doctor? How? Best doctor, best results medically, best patient reviews, most advanced. No, she's not a top doctor. She's a government doctor. She hasn't even had a patient in years, and all these hundreds of busy beavers who were a disaster during COVID. What are they doing now? They are still employed now. Like they haven't gone. They're still there. They're lurking. But while you and I move on with our lives, they're preparing for their next amazing time. I think that if you were to ask a public health officer, was the COVID-19 the best time of your life or the worst time of your life? I think 95% of them would say that was my time to shine. That was when I was on TV every day. That's when I got to make decisions that I thought only politicians elected by the people could make. That's when I got to, make up things that sounded science-y. Like I think there is a group of people who loved the lockdowns and would do anything to get back to that state of affairs. And the rest of us are their victims. We're trying to move on with our lives, and they're looking forward to the next one. That's what I get from reading your article.